So when I called the office, the assistant says to me, Jeff, Pat is so busy, she just can't talk with you right now. I said, wow, okay. So I was really pissed off. So what I did is I picked up the phone and I called back. And I said, hello, is Pat there? And the assistant said, well, yes, who may I say is calling? I said, it's Patrick Stewart. 0.5 seconds go by, and she's like, well, hello, Patrick, how are you? I said, you are so busted.
Welcome to Casting Actors Cast, insights for actors on acting in the business of show. Casting director Jeffrey Dreisbach takes you behind the scenes and reveals secrets to a successful acting career. You can find out more on the web at castingactorscast.com. Please enjoy, like, and share Casting Actors Cast. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Dreisbach.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Casting Actors Cast. I'm Jeffrey Dreisbach and glad to have you aboard. How are you today? Hope you're having a good day. Today's episode, can you do funny? Yeah, can you be funny? Can you do funny? I'm going to talk to you today about what it is to be a comic actor. What does it take? Do you have the comedy chops? When people talk about you, do they use comic terms? Do they use comic adjectives? That's what we're going to talk about today on Casting Actors Cast, and this is that moment in the podcast where I talk to you about how grateful I am that you're tuning in to Casting Actors Cast. And I hope you recall the last episode, we talked about the free offer that I'm giving to anyone who signs in the information form on castingactorscast.com. And that is, you just simply fill out the form, you give me your name and your email address, and you can leave me a comment if you like. I always like a comment. I always like knowing that there's somebody out there listening to me here. And if you do that, it'll take you to a downloadable PDF of my book called Conversation Pieces Out of the Studio. It's a 100-page workshop workbook about voiceovers. I made a lot of money doing voiceovers in my acting career, and I've had the opportunity to do some casting in voiceovers over the past few years as a casting director. So I want you to have this absolutely 100% free downloadable book, and it's a freebie. I'm not asking for anything other than just you giving me your name and email address. By the way, I don't sell your email address. I don't do anything with that. It just sort of helps, massage my ego just a little bit. So castingactorscast, all one word, .com. So thanks so much for that. So I was overhearing a conversation amongst a couple of casting directors. We were doing a seminar, and these two casting directors were kind of chatting, and I couldn't help but overhear. And one casting director said to the other, I just don't think they can do funny. I mean, there's just not a funny bone in their body. And I thought, wow, interesting. You're characterizing somebody's talent as not being funny. And so I thought today would be a really cool idea to sort of pull apart, to sort of tease out those qualities that can make you a comic actor. Now, when we talk about comedy and acting, I'm not talking about being a comedian. As you probably know, many comedians can and are really successful actors. But it's also very true that a lot of comedians just haven't an acting bone in their body. And I find that really fascinating. I mean, after all, you're still standing up in front of an audience. You're still eliciting a humorous response by the stories that you're telling. So how is it that a comic actor has the additional, and I was going to say burden, and maybe I will stick with that, has the additional burden of playing a character, of being in another reality? You see, comedians oftentimes, more often than not, are in their reality telling a story. It's they're talking about where they are with any given situation or circumstance, where a comic actor has to create and envelop that situation or circumstance that they're in through their character. So what makes you funny? Have you been told you're funny? What kind of feedback have you gotten? If you're in school, have you had a teacher or a fellow student talk about how funny you are? What makes you funny? What is the uniqueness that is you that can elicit a humorous response from others? What makes you funny? Because let's face it, and this is kind of a cold, maybe it sounds a little harsh, but you know what? Not everyone is funny. Not everyone is capable of delivering the goods in a role, and you've probably had the experience of being around somebody who just wasn't funny trying to be funny. I can tell you that as a casting person, sitting in a room where the actor is trying to be funny and is not is a very painful experience. And I empathize a lot because we've all had those situations, I'm sure, where we've gone into an audition or opening night of a show where you think a joke is going to land and it simply falls flat on its face. It's a really awful, awful feeling. Not everyone is funny. And I think the normal way to kind of understand this is realizing that you have to deal with the normal through a different lens. The humorous lens, the funny lens. Looking at life in slightly a skewed manner, in kind of an offbeat way, those actors can do that. They can bring forth that particular character and they can make choices that are slightly out of what we would consider the norm or the usual. So it's about being unusual. It's about being spontaneous. Looking at what is normal through a different lens really is one of those cornerstone definitions that can help you decide what makes you funny, because it comes down to feedback. What kind of feedback have you been given? Do people say that you're a funny person? Do you find things funny? So let's just look at it a little more objectively. So a man is walking down the street. And we, the audience, see him walking down the street. And he's kind of happy-go-lucky. And he's kind of a funny-looking guy. And he's whistling whatever he's whistling. And he's having this wonderful little fast, brisk walk down the street. And we see that in the next 3 steps, he's going to step on a banana peel. So close up on the banana peel. Close up on the man's face, smiling and happy. Close up of him stepping on the banana peel and slipping. His legs go up into the air and he falls flat on his back and his face goes from happy to stunned silence as if, what the hell just happened? Take a look at that scene in a different way. If we don't see the banana peel, and the man slips and falls, and he really hurts himself, we've just gone from an objective reality of us observing the man about to fall and what's going to happen now to an empathetic, subjective reality, which, frankly, is not funny at all. In the past month, has there been a television show, a movie, a theater piece that has made you cry? If so, what were the circumstances? Now, conversely, within the last month, how many times have you laughed? Have you thought something was funny? What made it funny? And those are the kinds of questions that I think could be really, really helpful. Anytime an actor is commenting on their humor, they've lost me. When they are pushing too hard, you know what I mean by pushing, when they think they have to over-exaggerate their character to the point where it's not believable anymore, they feel that that's the best way to show off their acting ability, and that, is just a disaster. I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. Being objective about your work is really, I think, useful. Comedy is a subjective thing. Not everyone finds everything funny in the same way. That's why if you're watching your work while you're auditioning, for example, or even while you're acting, then that is probably a death knell. That is not a good thing. Being objective means that you are looking at it from afar, that it's something outside of yourself. The subjective experience is that that's an internalized interpretation of what you're doing. So let's talk a little bit more about some acting issues with comedy. I mentioned this before, but, pushing it too much just makes the situation that you're in unbelievable. Now, there are, of course, farces. There's all kinds of types of comedy where you need to sort of push it. But I submit to you that even in those more exaggerated scenarios, being truthful and being connected to that character in a truthful way is really the only way to go. Along the same lines of pushing, I see actors punching the humor. In other words, hitting the punchline square between the eyes to the point where it just becomes not funny. There's an element of surprise to comedy that I think needs to be mentioned here. I love the Gilda Radner quote that I have is hitting on the truth before the other guy gets it. That's her definition of comedy. Hitting on the truth before the other guys get it. That is a great way to, I think, perceive what are the requirements when you are doing comedy. We do realize that there are two prongs to anything that is involved with acting and comedy. These two-prong approaches can be dealt with, and they're best dealt with simultaneously. And one is through the writing. What I mean by this is that the writer writes the material. Some material is just simply inherently funny. Anybody could be reading what this writer has written and it becomes funny because of the situation that you're in, because of the heightened reality, because of the bizarre nature of what you're talking about. Those are all things that the writer has contributed to make it funny. That's the writing. The other side to that comedy interpretation prong, or the other prong to that that other prong to that comedy interpretation is through the character. That means that who is saying it is inherently funny, that they have a skewed view of the world, that they have some kind of internal rhythm that is unlike what we would normally expect out of a person. And so there are unusual qualities that the character presents. And of course, the best comedy overall is one that includes both the character and good writing. Think first in terms of what the writer has given you. What are the elements that the writer has given you that you can instinctually embrace as something that is funny? And then the second thing is through your character. What is it about your character saying these things that can make it funny as well? Here are 3 tools that I really like that you must consider when you're supposed to be auditioning for something that is inherently funny or supposed to be funny. One is, of course, your energy. Now, not everything funny has to be fast. It's your good sense and your intelligence and your training and background as an actor knows that energy really can be as varied as you think the character needs to be. It just so happens that louder, faster, funnier, it works for a lot of different comedy material, but not everything, obviously. The other is the perspective. How is the character involved in what they are saying and how they are saying it? So their perspective is that they are so immersed in what they are saying, or their character is so droll or withdrawn or disconnected. Being able to know what is funny and what is not. But rest assured, humor comes really out of tension. Humor comes out of tension. Tense situations. So if you accept some of those tools and some of those premises that I've talked about, just to review, are you objective? Are you being subjective? If you're watching yourself, you're dead in the water. And of course, we talked about some acting issues with comedy, actors that are pushing or punching it too much. The answer to help you there is to absolutely immerse yourself 100% by concentrating into who you are, where you are, and what is happening. Who you are, where you are, and what is happening. So keep yourself from pushing or punching it, because you're filtering it through that different lens and through a different set of eyes, and that is the character. So how do you develop these skills? What do you do to figure out whether or not this is something that you should be working on a little bit more? And how do you find out a way to work on it? And here are a few suggestions I'd like to make. I've always been a huge fan of taking improv classes. The improvisation is one of those really fun, interesting ways. Do whatever you think is important or special or unique in the moment, and creating character, being able to think on your feet, being able to have an appropriate response to the situation that you're in. So improv classes are not only fun, but they're really excellent training. And if you've listened to my podcast about doing commercial work, you know that I'm a huge fan of doing improvisation classes for auditioning for commercials, because basically the trend in the industry now is to look for real, quote, real people that are selling these products or services. And if you can be spontaneous in a bizarre environment like a television studio or in an audition room with a camera and lights and all that stuff, if you're freed up, then you can really make an impact with your commercial work. So improvisation is really, really great. I think you should consider joining a comedy troupe. Getting together with a bunch of fellow actors. See if you can put some comedy ideas together. Maybe you could read some plays. Maybe you could call it, Funny Bone, and have a one day a month where you read funny scripts, whether they be television scripts or television pilots or whatever it is. Maybe you can find access to a way of freeing up that inner humorous self of yours, just to see if this is a hat that fits. The final one I'm going to suggest is probably the hardest one of all, which is doing stand-up comedy. Now, I have no experience in stand-up comedy. The only experience I do have in stand-up comedy is on occasion I like going to stand-up comedy performance. I can remember when Pat was casting the movie Splash, that she took me to these comedy clubs late at night so we could watch some of these comedians. And this was before Tom Hanks was set to play the part. And we would go to these comedy clubs, and what made it really just unbelievable was many of these comics knew that there was a casting director in the audience looking for part in a major feature film directed by Ron Howard. And it happened to be also like 2:00 in the morning or whatever it was, where there were maybe 5 people in the room, 4.5 of which were completely inebriated, and there Pat and I sipping our Diet Cokes, watching this comedian try to do a set in this environment. It was just so painful. It was just amazing. But I have to say, I just have so much respect for stand-up. And I don't think stand-up is for everybody. But I think if you've had a sense of, gosh, what it would feel like, what it would do, then do yourself a favor. Write yourself a 15-minute set. Commit it to memory. Try it out. See what the response is. I'm sure that will be really, really helpful feedback for yourself about the kinds of roles that you're going to be right for and the kind of humor that you are drawn to. Comedy is in such a whole rainbow of colors out there that comes in different styles, whether it's cynical or whether it's out of situation or whether it's in the writing, whatever it can be. There's so many options that are out there that finding your funny bone becomes the most important thing you can do for yourself right now. Now, you know what? I think I've been all over the map with this stuff. I've sort of had this kind of stream of consciousness podcast moment where I'm just sort of saying all of this stuff at once. And I know it might be slightly confusing. And if that is the case, I kind of apologize a little bit for that. But on the other hand, I would like to think that maybe you might want to go back and listen to this again, because I think that there are some pearls, some gems, some smart moments in there that you might find useful. If not, I look forward to having you listen again to our next podcast. I tried to make this kind of light, and I think I was a little bit kind of weird about the whole thing. But anyway, I'm so glad you're still listening. Listen in next time when we're going to have more fun here on Casting Actors Cast.
You've been listening to Casting Actors Cast with host Jeffrey Dreisbach. Find out more at castingactorscast.com and let us know if you would like us to cover topics you're interested in. Thanks for listening. I'm Matthew DeSarno.